Hello and welcome to the Business Spotlight interview series. I'm your host, Barrett McDonald. I'm joined today by Paul LeBlanc, self-defined serial entrepreneur. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you like to kick things off with a little bit about who you are and what started you on this journey?
Okay, it's probably going to consume most of the half hour we have, but suffice to say, I'm a born and raised Dartmouthian, so a lot of passion for this region and the region that's I spent my whole career building businesses in, and started in literally right out of university. I got 1 year under my belt, and then my dad hijacked me with different career plans, and we started up a cell phone company. And that led to an ad agency then called Extreme Group, which turned into Arrivals Departures after we sold the cell phone business, and ran that for almost 24 years, and just sold that to my partners in during COVID of all times. And we had two offices and probably 70 or 80 staff, and did all the work for Skip the Dishes. If you've seen the John Hamm commercials on TV, or anything from Atlantic Lottery, or um, uh, you know, the healthcare, the anti-smoking ads. If you've got a vintage of like 2012, those guys from FUBAR. So fun, very very fun business. But I got to the point where with that business, as I was running it, it was a lot of pressure and a lot of stress, but it exposed me to so many other different types of businesses that I just didn't want to babysit one type of business that was high stress all the time. So I issued stock options to my management team. We're a great bunch of guys. They took the company over and kind of ran the day to day. I maintained the majority, and then I just started getting involved in verticals that don't make sense to the average person. I bought into a company called VistaCare Communications. Me and six other guys bought that company. Then had a startup called Karma Gaming. Ran that for a while. We raised $7 million in venture capital. Got bought by Scientific Games in 2015. And then I bought a company in Charlottetown, PEI, called CMP, which built like major plant infrastructure, like all stainless steel, food grade stainless steel, tote dumpers and conveyors and all that type of stuff, as well as some pretty interesting IP. That company was on the ropes when we bought it. It was what they call a distressed asset. So we had to come in, fix it, refinance it, blow the management team up, and did all that. And then 2 years later, less than actually that, 20 months later, turned it around. It was very profitable, and we got bought by a company called FPS. And the company continues to scale. It's kind of cool. We took the company over. It was doing it had about 50 or 60 people in the two plants that we owned. And today, I think they employ about 220 people in Prince Edward Island, one of the top employers. So it's kind of a nice story from one that was on the brink of destruction to one that turned out to be quite a success story. And then in 2020, I took a year off in between just to kind of enjoy family and do some traveling and whatnot. And then COVID hit in 2020. And I started up a company called Seventh Wave Capital, which is a company that buys typically a minority interest in businesses that have got major growth aspirations. That being an entrepreneur is a very lonely thing. I know that from firsthand experiences in the variety of businesses I was in before, and having somebody in your court who really cares about your success mattered, and that's what Seventh Wave did. So we bought into a company called Verge Technologies, and another company called Avitech Systems, and then most recently, me and a couple guys bought McCarthy Roofing, which is Nova Scotia's biggest industrial commercial roofing company. So these days, I enjoy very much full access. All the partners I have in the business can call me at any time, but I don't show up to the office. I don't do anything operationally within the office. I guide some of the board meetings. We put the game plans together, probably a lot of what you would be doing as a coach, from the inside, and making sure that the owners think about on mentality, not in mentality, and they're able to grow and scale the business to heights they probably couldn't have on their own. So having a ton of fun with that. And then also during COVID, I founded another startup because the first one wasn't enough, called Collab. And it's basically a sharing tool for people who go to sports events and concerts and whatnot, to be able to post from different perspectives, your experience, and be able to share with everyone else who've got a like-minded interest in being there, and a whole bunch of other widgets that's attached to the app. We just raised, I think, $4.5 million for that business, and that one's also on the. I forgot to mention that one earlier. So yeah, all kinds of different businesses that are some I haven't even mentioned, but that's my quick intro. If I can, that's about as quick as I can make it.
Sounds good. So with all that in mind, how do you go about balancing your personal life with the demands of running all of these different businesses?
Well, to be honest, it was a lot harder years ago when I was still operational in the business. And today, I think the biggest answer is in defining what is my best life out of all of this. And my best life is not showing up every day in a business and driving it forward. I can contribute, but when I do that, and I've done it, I've earned my stripes, and I've spent 80-hour weeks and been on planes and been away from the family, all kinds, as almost every successful entrepreneur out there will probably regale you with the same experience. But in particular, when I started Seventh Wave Capital, my sabbatical that I took off for a year was really meant to answer those questions. What is it that I want to be in this next chapter? I don't want to retire. I don't want to just sit back and go bird watching or start a garden. But I also at the same time don't want to have to get up at 7 a.m., do the long days, the road trips. I've done all that. And my plan was, I was just turning 50 at the time in 2020. And my plan was to be able to retire by the time I'm 53. And that's what's happened. So I'm at a place now where I don't have to do anything, but I really enjoy aspects of business. I hate operating businesses, and usually businesses hate me operating businesses because I stay at a stratosphere that most people can't spend time talking, strategically all the time. They actually need to operate a business. So balance for me comes easier because I'm not working nearly as much as I used to, and that's a lot by design. So the chapter, I find myself in now, I'm having an absolute blast. It's the funnest time of my life because I can add value when I want to. I focused on my health the last year, and my relationship with my wife's never been better, my kids, and it's just a really cool place. That I'll say this and then I'll shut up. In my early career, I always had this notion that at that young Paul was in service of future Paul. I always thought that way. It was never about instant gratification for me, spending beyond my means. Everything was about having a retirement for future Paul that wasn't somebody at 60 or 70 that didn't have the knees or didn't have the health. So that was always my mission, was to get Paul at 50 to the place where he could operate and enjoy life the way I am now. So that's an interesting insight because it's not an insight that a lot of people have when they're thinking about business.
No, that level of self-awareness is envious for a lot of folks that would be watching this and listening, and those that aren't. It's a good place to be. So what would you say have been your biggest learnings as an employer along your journey?
You mean as a business owner? My biggest learnings.
With the people,
probably,
with the staff.
Yeah. So there's a couple questions in that. I think the biggest one from an ownership perspective, and again, all of this depends on what you want out of business, because my answer is not the right answer for everybody. But my answer always was, I had a dear friend of mine, Wayne Crawley, asked me a question in 2012 that literally hit me right between the eyes, and it was the impetus for a major life change that I went through from 2012 to where I am now. He asked me a question, and it started with an insult, and they always do. I like you, Paul, but how do you make money when you sleep? And that question literally changed everything for me. I obsessed about it because the life I was living before, if I wanted, if I wanted more money and getting Paul to retirement at 50, then that meant I had to work harder, and there was only so much time in the day. The analogy of getting hit by the bus, if I got hit by a bus back then, it would have collapsed the company because a lot was dependent on me. So from 2011 to 12, I put a whole bunch of controls in place, stock options for my management team, all that stuff, so that I could get to a place where I was on the business majority versus in the business. And if I were to suggest any key to my success in the past, is that I refuse to operate in stratospheres too close to the business. You can get people for that. There's all kinds of people you can hire who are better at project management, who are better at accounting, they're better at fulfillment, they're better at supplier relations, they're better at customer relations even. but finding someone who knows how to stay in the highest stratosphere and is paying attention to where the direction of the business is going, that's very difficult. To be honest, it's easy to do the other, right? The business needs you 24/7. It can always need more of you. And you feel good, right? I wake up in the morning, I got 100 emails, and I got to go out and I'm going to meet with this customer. So that's good. What doesn't feel good is when you clear your schedule and you're like, fuck, now what? Now what do I do with the time that I've got? I really got to push myself out of my comfort zone to create a path for this company that no one else, should and could create. So on the business versus in the business is difficult. It kind of answers your second question of how to deal with employees or staff. First of all, I hate those two words. I never like them. I consider everyone my partner, and I understand that there's it's still a dictatorship, but the respect for me is a big thing for people, and I am who I am. I don't pull rank. If you're no good, then you just don't belong there. And I've always had no asshole policy in my life. So if you're not fun to work with, then typically you're not fun to work with anyone else. I don't care how good you are, you don't belong there. And as a result, most of the cultures that we've created are places that people wanted to be and contribute. And I celebrated people when they want to leave. If they want to, go experience things and become a better human for it, no harm, no foul there either.
So following up on that, what would you say are some of the keys you have looked at in the past and currently when you're trying to surround yourself with those partners? Like, what are the things you look for in them?
Yeah, honestly, less overlap, right? I mean, one of the best examples I can give was from my CFO in one of the companies. He was very much a co-CEO mindset. He lived at the same stratosphere. I had skills he didn't have. He had skills I don't have. He was incredibly detailed. I'm not. He was incredibly operationally focused. He's not. He's a saver. I'm a spender. He's visionary. I was. So the things that we overlapped on, we became a superpower. And then when I went out and did business development or customer relations or looked at mergers and acquisitions, we bought in that one company in the agency, I think 3 or 4 different acquisitions in the time that we were there. He would do all the math, right? He would make sure that the deal got created right, the MOU was right, the purchase sale agreement was correct, and that shit I'm terrible at. He'd read the shareholders agreement, which I'm awful at, and make sure that he has my back. So I think a very well-rounded team, and I think the first way I'd answer that question is you need to know exactly what you're great at as an entrepreneur. If you're the shareholder in the business, you're the president, you're the founder, you're the CEO, you need to know what you are excellent at that the business needs most from you. That's the caveat. And when you understand those things, then you understand what you need to focus on, and then you surround yourself with the people that do all the other shit that takes you away from being able to focus on those 2 things that are really going to scale the business or set it up for competitive differentiation or whatever else is out there, right? So I think that defines it. I actually use that strategy when we're looking at hiring within an organization. I'll say, hey, tell me, Barrett, what are we know we need to hire somebody within your department. What do you hate the most about your job? Give me the 5 things. And you write your 5 things up, and those 5 things become the job description for somebody else. So that keeps people in the lane of things that they're really great at, and that other people who love that shit that you hate become, and it just creates a better rounded, team, as opposed to, we need person X, and everyone just keeps doing the crap that they don't want to do.
That makes total sense. What are some of the misconceptions about running a business you've kind of come across in the beginning stages and you come across in your acquisition portion of your business, and how do you address them?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that you have to work hard. Now, I'm not saying you don't, because I worked very hard. But the era that I'm in now, if I looked at that era back then, to be able to make $1 million back then, you could do it, but it took a lot. And now to make $1 million when you're working smart is very, very different. And to be honest, much easier than it was back then. So I think that probably the biggest misconception is people who say, I'm working really, really hard, it's crazy, blah, blah, blah. That's not a badge of honor in my mind. Anyone can work a lot of hours, and I don't respect people who just work hard. It's the people who work smart. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception because I meet with, I'm on the board of Volta and Wallace McCain Institute and Creative Destruction Labs and I'm in YPO. so I'm a part of organizations that have got a lot of people, and I mentor a lot at the Walls McCain Institute, for example. So you're constantly seeing people who are working a lot, and you see people who talk about how hard their life is and how hard they're working. But if you're not making time for strategy and shaping the company, that's a hamster wheel. You're not going to outrun it, right? So you got to figure out how to get off the hamster wheel so that you can actually create a path in front of you, as opposed to, that's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So yeah.
Absolutely. If you had to start everything all over again from square one, what would you do differently the next time around?
I would buy. Not organic growth is painful. And look, it's not without what I'm saying, go buy a bunch of companies. That's not without its set of risks as well. But the first half of my life, I didn't know what M&A was, and I didn't study it enough to understand where economies of scales come from, how to leverage debt. Everyone just thinks if I go buy a company, I need $5 million in the bank to do it. You don't. There are acquisitions that are getting made right now with not a dime of your own money, right? Between vendor takebacks and loan to value from certain banks that are out there. It's just like when I went to Toronto, that was the hardest time I've ever had in my life. 3 of the darkest, most depressing years expanding the agency there, because I didn't know anyone. I had an office, I had no staff, I had no customers. The sub-debt crisis was going on. Everyone was cutting back on their marketing. It was awful. And what I should have done back then was gone out and bought an agency and rolled it in, as opposed to doing it the hard way. I probably would have paid off an agency with several $1 million in revenue in 3 years versus got to 3 years, half the revenue, and stress-induced irritable bowel. So I think there's
right. Yeah.
I think the purchase aspect of business and scale and growth is probably one that I spend a lot more time thinking about now that I just didn't understand back then. Like there's a conference going on this week called the Business Transitions Conference. I've chaired it twice, and it's a great place for people to go. And I'm not just saying that conference, but there's all kinds of conferences out there where you can learn how M&A works. It's not terribly complicated. But to understand at least enough to be dangerous, to have conversations about how to scale your business, either in different verticals or different geographies or bigger market share with what you have using, the bank's money. So that would be the bigger one that I would have done differently.
OPM is the slogan of the day, really. Other people's money all the time, right?
That's it.
Yeah. So what would you attribute your growth to over all these years?
Probably impatience, ADD for sure, and I think it's a superpower. I'm just a growth junkie. I don't like babysitting companies that are doing $2 million in revenue and 300 grand in EBITDA. And I find churn happens too fast with your employees. They don't see growth, so they get stale. And so for me, I would probably say just the growth mindset is what I attribute my growth to. I've just never good enough, and I knew what I needed to be when I got to this chapter that I'm in. It was a very well articulated. I could have got there 700 different ways, but I got there. But I knew exactly what I was going to. And if you don't pick a goal and you don't pick a timeline, you're never going to achieve it. Most people just throw shit against the wall at the end of the year and see what sticks from a net profit or an EBITDA perspective. They don't even business planning. When I direct companies, business planning is not rocket science for me. It's not a fucking 65-page bookend that people are going to ignore after it's created. What are the 2 things that your company needs to do to be in far better position than it was in before? And what are the strategies you're going to do it? And there becomes your board meetings. That's all you focus on, is though making sure that you're getting those 2 agreement that those are the 2 things that are the most vital, and then the plan and how you're activating the plan and achieving it. And if you do that with the upper umbrella of how you're going to have this company contribute to your retirement strategy or whatever it is you're looking for, then by the time you get to that point, you could choose whether you want to stay doing what you're doing, but at least you've got the security of your investments that you were hoping for to begin with. So planning and the right type of stratosphere, and then planning to activate. That's what I would say on the growth front.
Absolutely, tremendous piece of advice. So one last thing before we jump off here, for anyone watching who's thinking about getting off from behind their desk and going on their own entrepreneurial journey, what's the last piece of advice, or one of the pieces of advice you'd give them watching this series?
So this is for people that aren't currently entrepreneurs, that they're just considering being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
talk to people. The number one thing is it's going to be harder than you think it is. I think that entrepreneurs, and this is a blessing, not a curse, have got a degree of a naivete to them. They think that if you build it, they will come. And you couple that with don't give a fighting person no way out because they'll fight like there's no way out. I think having mentors, people that you can talk to. Atlantic Canada is a beautiful spot. I mean, it's the only reason I only invest here. I don't invest anywhere else because I love maritime values. I love maritime people. I love the fact that we're all in it together. We're have-nots, and I really think that we as a region, should and can punch above our weight. And most people will answer the phone. I'm a quick story. One time when I was actually, thinking about going into business again, I'd sold the cell phone company to Mickey McDonald in '96. And I didn't know if I had to go back to school. Should I go work for Moosehead to get a beer rep and be around, all kinds of party people all the time? And I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to call Arthur Irving. So I picked up the phone, looked at I was waiting for the PEI ferry. I called 1-800 yada, 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 asked for Arthur Irving, and I got hello. I'm like, is this Arthur Irving? Yes. What can I help you? He gave me a half hour. Right. I mean, this is a phone call into a massive organization, and he answered his own phone without any goalies. I couldn't believe it. And, if you want access to people like John Risley, or Darren Mantes or Wade Daw or Rob Normando, or like people in this region will give you your time. Don't do it alone. Get a support group, get some coaching, get people to weigh in on it, because it will be a catalyst to your growth. There's no point in being a rat in a maze and hitting walls the whole career. It's way better to know what's the maze look like and where are those things that I need to focus on. And I've been in YPO since I've been 23 years old, and by far it's been the thing that has changed my career. Having a group of guys that I meet with for the last 22 years, some of the smartest people in this region. We meet every month, and they have my back, and they're my own little board of directors. And anytime I got an idea, they either tell me I'm crazy, go jump off a cliff, or they say it's a cool idea, here's how to implement. Right? Having that level of connection and connectivity with a region that wants to give it, don't underplay that.
Fantastic last piece of advice, and I thank you for your time and everything today, Paul. And to those of you watching this series, I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.
Thanks for having me.